Welcome to Old Classic Car and part 13 of original photographs of British cars, the 1950s and the 1960s. And to begin with, one of several photos supplied by Steve Burden. Here, a Ford 100E Prefect receives a replacement engine. This was at RAF St Morgan. The date is 1973 and the car has a Devon area registration number dating to 1959. We've got a Hillman Super Minx on the right hand side there as well. Who remembers doing engine swaps at the side of the road back in the day? And there's another photo of the Prefect up in the air, bonnet off, engine out. I've got a table there for the various bits and pieces. There's another 100E on the right hand side there, and behind the Prefect we've got a Mark 1 Ford Cortina, a Mini and a Renault 10 of all things. There's a A40 Farina behind the Renault. There you go, hoiking in or out. The little side valve engine, 1172cc side valve engine in these Ford 100Es at the time. Quite a heavy old lump, but three of you should easily be able to hoik one of those engines in and out in an afternoon, I would have thought. Great photos, thanks for those, Steve. Many more of Steve's photos to come. Now we've got a side-on view, a black and white photograph here of a Morris Minor MM. This is a four-door highlight car. I think this was in New Zealand, but particularly interesting is this car has the shorter bonnet. If you look at other photos of Morris Minors of the era, the bonnet extends all the way to the front doors, but here you can see a definite gap. Now to Peter Ward's photos, his pictures have appeared in many of these videos, and here is a Singer Hunter. He was a big fan of Singers. JTY 84 is being started on handle on a very cold, icy day indeed. That's a Northumberland registration dating to 1955. Note the horse mascot on the top of the radiator. Another Steve's photos here. Great shot here of a Mark 1 Bedford CA 548 JNU. That's a Derbyshire registration from late 58 or early 1959. The gent in the photo is called Ian Knight, and the photograph was taken in Wales. Lovely two-tone Bedford CA, I really like that. Now thanks to Roger, he sent over several old press photographs for me, and here we have a Triumph Mayflower, the first of two photographs in this set featuring the Triumph Mayflower. This had a 1247cc engine. These were built from 1949 and into 1953, I believe. 38 brake horsepower only, side valve engine, a very famous razor edge styling you can see there. And interestingly, in Australia, where they often had special bodied versions of our cars, you could get a coupe utility or pickup version of the Triumph Mayflower. I've never seen one of those other than in photographs, but yeah, thanks to Roger for that. A couple of great photos here now from Neil. This is a coach crash, obviously. It's a Hebel operated vehicle, and the location apparently was Liverpool Road in Burnley, and I think the vehicle is a Leyland Royal Tiger. It's clearly had a bit of an altercation with the house wall. Not quite sure what happened there, maybe brake failure or something like that. If you know any more about this particular incident, please pop a note into the comments. But yeah, and clearly something went wrong there. Next up in this collection of 50s and 60s car photos, original photographs only, we have SEV 988. That is an Austin A40 Devon, a four-door Austin A40 Devon. That's an Essex registration from 1951. Interesting, look at under this sill there, under the doors, there is a externally mounted aerial. That's quite an interesting feature. And here's the same car with a few extras on it. You've got one of those parking proximity markers on the front wing there, and a big lamp on the front. But yeah, quite a few little modifications obviously took place on this car. But where is it now? What happened to that? Presumably it was scrapped a long time ago. And here's a couple of really interesting photos again from Neil, so thanks to him for that. And there he is in 1969. This was on a visit to Nottingham University, in particular their Department of Production Engineering. And we have a sectioned example of the good old Riley Elf. And it really clearly shows just how well packaged these little BMC cars, obviously based on the Mini, were. You can see the transverse engine layout there and the side mounted radiator, and you can see all the ignition parts on the front of the engine. It explains why they were so prone to conking out if water went through the radiator, especially on the Minis. So you'd often end up covering those electrical components with a rubber glove or something like that, just to try and keep the damp out. Now here's another of Roger's press photos that he kindly sent over. And here we have a side-on view of a Bentley R-Type. This was the replacement for the similar Mark VI, the previous Mark VI, and these were built from 1952 to 1955. What a beautiful looking car that is. One of my own photos now from my own file, and we've got an L series Vauxhall. Now I believe this is the 4-cylinder Wyvern. The 6-cylinder Velox had, I think they were cream coloured wheels, but if this is an original car, the body coloured wheels were on the Wyvern, and these were built 1948 through to 51. A couple more of Steve's photos now, and this time I think this was his brother-in-law's, if I remember correctly, Ford Escort Mk1 2-door TGH 108F, that dated as a late 67 or early 1968 car, like the Ford strip across the top of the windscreen. Who remembers those? They were all the rage back in once upon a time. And we've got a vinyl roof as well, Ross style wheels, looking quite sporty, and even got a tow bar on this particular car and a sticker for Capital Radio in the back window. This photo I think dates the 1970s, but it's very much a 1960s car, so it appears in this particular collection. If you've not seen the previous 12 instalments of this series, please have a look at them when you're done. Now to an auto test somewhere on a quiet airfield somewhere in the 1950s. We've got a Ford Anglia E494A on the left hand side there, but even rarer than that is the Lee Francis 14 horsepower Sports that you can see in the middle there. That is a rare car. And there's that Anglia again at the very lurid angles as it sped its way around the course. MPW 130, that's a Norfolk registration from 1951. I wonder if this had any of the period tuning gear items on it, such as aquaplane, cylinder heads or twin carburetors, that kind of thing. Bellamy front suspension was available for the old upright Fords. Back to Steve's photos now. We've got an RAF Bedford. This again was at RAF St Morgan where he was based, and it's a J series Bedford. I'm not quite sure what that particular body would have been used for on the back there, or what its application was, but if you know, please pop a note in the comments. As always, they're always welcomed. But great colour photo. Now, several photos of old specials turned up recently. This one was registered LG9662. That's a Cheshire series from 1928 to 32. And I think the chassis under there, you can see a spoked wheel on the other side and a plain disc wheel on this side. So obviously it was sort of mid-build at this point in time. There's another photo of the finished car with a separate windscreen assembly, L-plate on the front as well. I've got a feeling this was based on a Morris chassis, going off the scant notes that appear on the back of this little collection of photographs. Special building was all the rage in the 1950s and early 60s, and there were all manner of fiberglass bodies available to drop onto a Morris or an Austin 7 chassis, something like that. And there's a rear view of the same finished car. A bit of a tight squeeze to get in and out of the cabin with the roof up, and no rear window in the soft top either. But yeah, a really fascinating subject, these old specials, the Ford based and the Austin based specials. Really interesting cars. Do you know what body that is? I'm not quite sure myself. And this, I think, is the chassis that went underneath it. I believe this is a Morris Minor chassis. You can see the side valve engine there looks very similar in setup to my 32 Minor that's in the garage, and clearly the axles were changed, or at least the stub axles were changed, and the chassis possibly lengthened as well. But very interesting photo. Another of Steve's pictures here. We've got a young lady sat behind the wheel of a mid-1950s Humber Hawk. Very nice car indeed. I do like those a lot. Well, carry on this collection of original photos of British cars in the 50s and 60s. We've got several now of 6093HB. This is a Riley 1.5. This was Steve's dad's car. His name was Peter Burden. And that car has a Coventry registration dating it to 1960. There's quite a gaggle of other classic British cars in the background there. A Morris Minor Traveller and a Vauxhall Viva. There's another photo, a great photograph of the Riley 1.5. Of course, you had the Wolseley 1500, which was very similar, but single carburettor, whereas the Riley with its twin carbs and extra dials and so on was a bit of a sportier version, a B-series engine, 1489cc. These were built between 57 and 1965. I believe this is a Series 2 car, because it has hidden bonnet and boot hinges. The very first, the Series 1 Riley 1.5s, you could see the hinges fore and aft. But this is a slightly later car from 1960. Optional headrests there as well, and those are the clip-on head restraints that you could buy. There's a head-on view of the car at dusk, presumably. Very nice little car indeed. I remember Dad had a Wolseley 1500 only a few years ago, and that drove really, really well. The underpinnings were based on those of the Morris Minor, which was always a good start, but the larger engine. Really, really nice car. Another Roger Coleman's photos that he kindly sent over. This is the first of several pictures of the Razor Edge Triumph Renown that will feature in this particular collection. These were built from 1949 onwards and continued in production until 1954. Called the Renown, but there was actually the 1800, the 2000, and then the Renown. There were three slightly different versions of the same car. Now, more of Steve's photos, excellent photographs, and a gaggle of Morris Minors here. You've got YMD385 at the top left there, and in the middle it's being prepared for a TV programme. We've got another car on the bottom left there, an early Series 2. We've got another one with a Caravan. I wonder what make of Caravan that is. And on the right, bottom right, a car with a converted screen. Now, back to that auto test we saw before. LLP 775, there's that Lee Francis 14 Sports, and amazingly, this car is still around. It's still taxed, still on the road. It dates to 1950, and there are photographs of it online. If you bang that registration number into Google Images, you'll see it's finished in a pale green metallic. There's that auto test again on an unknown airfield somewhere or other. We've got an Austin A40 Somerset, probably the least likely car that you would pick to go zooming around the cones in, because they didn't handle brilliantly. They were always a bit criticised for being underdamped at the front. I remember the one I drove and used to have 20 or so years ago. Used to be a bit wallowy. Nice old car, but wasn't a race car. Now, thanks to Rob for this wonderful old black and white photo here. We've got two classic vans. We've got an Austin 8 van on the left-hand side there, and on the right, a Fordson 500-weight van. Very, very nice pair indeed. I do like those. Another of Roger's photos here, and we've got a fine looking Bentley. This is the Mark 6, the forerunner of the R-Type that we saw before. And going off the registration number on this particular car, this one dates to 1952, which was the year that the R-Type actually took over from the Mark 6. Yeah, very handsome car indeed. Peter Ward has supplied quite a few photographs, and they've appeared in many videos now. Here we've got one of his 646 APJ. This is a Singer Hunter. That's a Surrey registration from 1956. It's still got the starting handle in the front there. I don't think that was a permanent fixture, so clearly it was just about to be started up. Now, Ian kindly sent over some photos. He's sent over a few before, and here are some of the first of several lorry photos he sent over. Look at that 1965 Bedford TK. Had a bit of a wallop, but they took the body off, replaced the cab, and it went back on the road again. Now, how well the driver did, I'm not quite so sure. History doesn't quite recall. Back to Triumph Renowns, but another one of the auto test photos as opposed to one of the press photos we saw before. And here it is, a big old Renown, well laden, plenty of passengers, just about to set off from the line. You can see some old RAF hangars in the background there. I'd love to know what airfield this was at. I'm guessing this was in the early 1950s. And there it is again, jumping on the brakes. You can see the front of the car bucking down, really, really cool. You can see more of those hangars in the background as well. There's an MG, I think one of the T-Series cars possibly, just hiding away in the background there. But yeah, great photos. These auto tests were super popular, organised by motor clubs up and down the land. Same event, I think, and we have a couple of classic Morrises here. YMC 51 in the foreground. That's a London registered 1952 Morris Oxford MO. And these were built from 48 all the way through to 1954. Side valve 4-cylinder engine under that car's bonnet. Back to Steve's excellent photographs, and here's a great photo of an old Rover P4. The notes accompanying this one, it says, Fred preparing for the Spain trip in 1957. You can see he's wielding an oil can, and there's an old 2-gallon petrol can, I think, just on the floor at the front there. So clearly a bit of prep work. It's got a roof rack on it as well. Ready for a trip to Spain. Must have been a nice old journey. Now it's a pre-war standard on the left, but in the background there we've got a Mark 1 Austin Mini. That's a deluxe with a bumper overriders. We've got an Anglia 105E behind that, and an Austin Cambridge behind that. Now, 3 photos here of a Morris 10, a Morris 10 Series M. These were introduced before the war, late 1930s, but this car, DVD 445, is a 1948 car. And the difference is, these post-war cars had a much curvier radiator grille and badge arrangement. The pre-war cars had a much more angular badge at the top of the grille, and that's the way to tell the two cars apart if you don't know what date the registration is. There's another photo of the same car. There's a lady there putting some, I don't know, heather on the front of it perhaps. There's a little doggy there as well. RAC members badge also. Third photo of this Morris 10M. It still has the heather on the front there, so presumably this was taken on the same day or thereabouts. There's a gentleman this time here enjoying a cup of tea and admiring the view. We're about halfway through this particular set, but like I say, if you haven't seen the 12 previous instalments of these wonderful old photos, please check them out. Now, it's a great photo. I love this one. My favourite aeroplane almost, a VC-10. In the foreground, we have a 64 Austin 1100, but the VC-10 in the background, that started out with BUA and British Caledonian and is now on display at Brooklands. That was the Sultan of Oman's private jet. He didn't do things by halves, did he? Now we've got a press photo here, OWC 226. That's a Ford publicity car. That appeared in many publicity photos back in the 1960s. The car, of course, is a Mark III Ford Zephyr 6. Very smart indeed too. It's a snowy scene. Lots of chaps on horse riding through in the background there. Another photo of Steve's, that's a great picture. And we have in the foreground there a standard pennant. This was the revised run-out version, if you like, of the standard 10, sort of introduced just to keep the model ticking over before the Herald was ready to go on sale in about 1959 or thereabouts, I think. We've got a Ford D Series lorry in the background. Another old press photo here, FDU 156, that's a nice picture. And the car is a Triumph 1800 Roadster. And that dates to sort of late 1955 or early 1956. I think that's a St Helens registration. Quite an interesting looking car, very interesting proportions, very long front, but quite a stubby tail. Back to BMC now, we've got SVB 508. That's a London car, circa 1957 or early 58. These were built from 57 to 58, and it's an Austin A55 Cambridge Mk1. We've got a Vauxhall PA in the background there, quite an early one with a 3-piece rear windscreen. Later cars will be a wraparound job. Now for Peter's photos, we've got Singer SM 1500s and Hunter police cars here. The date is June 55 and the location is Maidstone. That's a fleet of police cars. What a great lineup of that is. Wow. I wonder if any of those cars survive. There are very few of them about, I should think now. Bit of a roadside stop here, roadside picnic and a cup of tea. This lady seems to be enjoying a quick cigarette and a cup of finest, and the car is a Ford Anglia. The Pops had plain wheeled hubcaps and the Anglias had those silver metal sort of extra attachments on the hubcaps. That's the difference. Now we've got a wonderful Jaguar here, a Jaguar Mark V. This is a 3.5 litre car from 1950, and this has got a radio aerial as well, but it's not underslung on this particular car as it was on that Devon a little while ago. This one is on the scuttle in the more commonly found place. This could be at Browns Lane in fact, but let me know in the comments. Another roadside stop here. We've got a couple of doggies and a family and a trusty old Austin. This could be an A40 or the A50 Cambridge, I'm not quite sure. They both look pretty much the same as far as I know. One had the 1200cc engine and the other 1500cc, so either way, little 4-cylinder engine under that car's bonnet. Great little car. Another Austin in there, and many interesting cars there. This is the High Street in Farnham in 1957. Got all sorts there. There's a few interesting cars on the right. You can see a Vanguard Estate. Next to that, the shapely rear roofline of a Hillman Minx Californian. Obviously a Somerset in the middle. We've got an Austin Healey over on the left there. Back to Steve's photos and BPF 915B. That's an MG 1100, a Surrey registered car. A 4-door version. You could also get the 2-door MG 1100. We've still got the grill off Dad's MG 1100 in Harley's shed, in fact, one of the few surviving parts of that car that he had in the 1970s. KKV 550, another one of the Renown series cars. That's a Coventry registration, which perhaps you'd expect given that Standard Triumph was based in Coventry, and that car dates to 1951. Quite a good looking car. The razor edge styling didn't really work that well on the Mayflower in my opinion, but the Renowns, I think they look quite good. Back to Peter's photos, YEV 128. This is a Singer, the SM 1500. That's a 1954 registered car, and that came from Essex originally. These were noticeable for the very thick windscreen pillars and flat windscreens when other manufacturers were going towards curved windscreens and so on. Steve sent this photo over. It's a little bit grainy, but a nice subject, and it shows his dad with the prized family Jaguar Mark II 3.8. Glorious car, that's seen here in the early 1960s. He would later go on to own a Rover P6, one of the early XJs, a 2.8 litre XJ6. Thanks to Roger again for this wonderful photo now, 67RR19, that's an unusual registration number, but the car is a 1960 Silver Cloud 2 drop head coupe. It's left-hand drive. I'm assuming that format of registration was just so that it wouldn't tie the car to any particular country. If you put a UK registration on it, it wouldn't look very good maybe abroad. Now, Birch Brothers private hire, and we have a Leyland Comet. There's a photo of a Birch Brothers Leyland Comet already in the old classic car image archive on the main old classic car site, so check that out if you like your classic coaches and buses. But yeah, lovely old photograph, that one. Thanks, Steve. Another of Peter's Singer photographs. He did like his Singers. And we've got a Singer Hunter. You can just about see the horse's head radiator mascot on the front of the bonnet there. And on the left-hand side, a good old ADO 16 and Morris 1100. Of course, you could get the Austin 1100 and all the other variants as well, the MGs, the Wolseley, Riley, and so on. Here's a great colour photograph now of London. This is about 1962. All manner of interesting cars. We've got an Anglia 105E with an odd door on it. And we've got an Anglia E494A on the left, an A30 or 35 van, and a Hilmer Minx Californian, a very stylish little car. I do like that a lot. Now back to those funny little specials that we were talking about before, and this appears to be the same body shell but a different build. The other car had a separate windscreen assembly. This has got an integral windscreen assembly on it and a different registration. That is registered CTN 501. It's apparently based on the 35 Minor, Morris Minor chassis, and the body was lengthened a little bit to accommodate the chassis. It's got the integral windscreen, like I say, and this one had a 1953 Morris Minor side valve engine out of one of the last of the Morris Minors. But these are great little cars. But if you recognise who did that body, please let me know in the comments, because I'd love to know whose body that was. There were so many manufacturers of these fiberglass bodies. Now back to Ian's lorry photographs, and oh, a very sad looking Foden. This is a Foden 8-wheeler. It belonged to Amalgamated Roadstone, and it had a bit of an issue when trying to back onto a weighbridge alongside the River Avon. It's looking all a bit sorry for itself, really. The location was William Butler's Chemical and Tar Works, apparently in Bristol, and clearly things had gone very, very wrong when the driver was trying to back his weighty 8-wheeler onto the weighbridge, and as you can see, that is the end result. A very sad looking Foden lorry. Dear oh dear. So thanks for those photos, Ian. I really appreciated seeing those. Amazing. Another photo now of a Triumph Renown, the very upright, regal and elegant looking Triumph Renown. FDU 808 is the registration of this particular car. Very nice indeed. Still quite a few photos of these British cars in the 1950s and 1960s, and here, thanks to Laurie for this one, we've got a Hilmer Minx PYW885. This was a company car apparently. There's Laurie on the left and his brother alongside, and the location of this photo is the Kirkstone Pass. I do like those little Minxes, very much like a shrunken version of the contemporary Humber Hawk. Also from Laurie is this head-on view of the family's Morris Minor. That's a Series 2 with a split windscreen, XRO 113, that was his mother's car, and behind it is a rare Standard 8, a drop-head Standard 8. That's a rare old beast indeed. Thanks also to Laurie for this photo, and that, of course, is a Triumph Herald Estate. This one was taken at about 1962. You can see the Morris Minor on the left-hand side there, and they had owned this one from new. That's a really useful car, that is. This is probably my favourite of all the post-war Bentleys, a Series 2 Flying Spur coachwork by H.J. Mulliner. But that is a cracking looking car, I think. I do love the lines of these. Again, this is a left-hand drive car, but yeah, what a beautiful looking thing that is. And my thanks to Matthias, he sent this over. The photo was taken in the mid-1960s. That's the family's Austin A30. This was photographed near Zurich. There's Matthias at the front there with his cap, and his mother, his grandmother, and a foster child as well from Tibet. What a great old family photograph that is, and I trust to have lost an A30 with them. talking of Austin A30s, we've got another one here, thanks to Nev over in Australia for this one. And this one has Morris Minor rear wheels, slightly larger diameter, just to up the gearing a little bit. I'm surprised I don't see that more often, actually. That'd be quite an easy mod to do, I would have thought. Just bolt on the slightly larger diameter wheels for a Moggy, and it would just cruise along that little bit better. And also from Nev, two great Austins here. That's his brother's A95 Westminster on the left-hand side there. And on the right, the first of several appearances in this video of his own Austin A96 Westminster. Both of those are really good cruisers. I could see myself with one of those quite happily. But yeah, thanks to Nev for these old photographs. There's another photo of the A90 Westminster. Clearly has a radio on board with the aerial on the front there. That's just it's a nice car. That's a rare old bird, that is now. I'm sure they didn't make too many of those. They were introduced in 1954, these particular cars, and were only produced until 1956. There's another front three-quarter view of the same car. But yeah, that's really nice. I wonder if it's still around anywhere. Is it possible to look at registration numbers in New South Wales? I wonder. I'm sure you'll let me know in the comments if it is. But yeah, it'd be great to think that maybe that car's around somewhere still. Staying with Nev's photos, here's another one of the cars that he really cherished back in the day, a Wolseley 690. This is a rare girl now. These were introduced in 1954, same year as that A90 we've just been looking at, but these continued in production until 1959. There's another one of his cars, a Jaguar Mk7. These had the 3.4 litre XK engine under the bonnet. That engine made its debut, of course, in the XK120 sports car, but this is the mighty saloon of the 1950s. These were built from 1951 through to 1956, and a gloriously elegant car. Very smart indeed, I do like those. Now to Barney, he kindly sent me some photographs of standards. Here we've got a rear view of a very well laden Standard 8 with additional boot box on the back. Quite handy for storage, especially as it didn't have the opening boot lid, these early Standard 8s. But it didn't do much for rearward vision, I wouldn't have thought. But yeah, great old photographs. Thanks so much to Barney for that. And this series of photos here, again showing a little Standard 8, and even rarer, the Standard Companion, the estate car version of the Standard 10. I had one of these a few years ago and I loved it. It was such a practical little car. On the lower photo there, the colour photo was in the 1970s, but you can see the Standard on the right hand side with a broken trailer, and it had already done 200,000 miles. Now to Steve's photos, and a very tired looking Thames 307E. 19 NWL is the registration on that one. That's an Oxford series, and it dates this car to about April 1962. But yeah, it's a very tired looking specimen indeed. But as I've always said, I do like these old commercial vehicles. And to round things out, a couple of photographs of a lovely old six-cylinder Austin of the 1950s. This is an A105/6 Westminster. Glorious, quite an upmarket car for its day, six-cylinder engine. Registration 187FPC. That confirms that it spent its early years in the Surrey area and put on the road in 1958. There's a rear view of the same car. I'm guessing these photos are probably from the early 1970s, so the car was clearly a few years old, but what a great old girl that is. Great to see those photographs. And that rounds out this 13th instalment of original photos of British cars of the 1950s and the 1960s. I'd like to thank again everyone that has sent over old photographs. I've used as many as I can, and there's still more to come, don't worry. If you've sent them over and they haven't yet appeared in one of these videos, they may well feature in future uploads. But thanks so much again for watching this video. Please check out the other instalments if you haven't yet seen them yet. There is a playlist dedicated just to photograph collections here on the Old Classic Car channel, and there'll be more videos along very, very soon. So thanks for watching, and bye for now.